Emily's voice trembled as she stood in the small motel room, rain still dripping from her hair. "I can't believe this. You lied to me. You told me you were just a taxi driver, but you're a millionaire who played with my heart." Her eyes were red, filled with both anger and heartbreak. Michael, the man she thought she knew, sank into the chair by the window, his face pale. His voice cracked when he whispered, "Then let me die. My life has no meaning without you." Those words echoed like thunder, leaving Emily frozen in shock. The audience feels the tension immediately. How did a simple maid and a hidden millionaire end up in this storm of betrayal and broken promises? That's the story we're about to unfold. But before we dive deeper, don't forget, subscribe to this channel right now and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring you more powerful stories like this one. Let's rewind to a few weeks earlier on the rainy streets of New York City. Michael Anderson was not just any man. He was the heir to a luxurious hotel empire in Manhattan, living under the shadow of wealth and expectation. But deep inside, he was suffocating. Tired of fake smiles and shallow conversations, he longed for something real, something honest. So in an act of rebellion, he shaved off his polished image, dressed in plain clothes, and took the driver's seat of an old yellow taxi. On that stormy evening, fate brought Emily Johnson into his cab. She was exhausted, her maid uniform damp from the rain, her hands rough from long hours of scrubbing and cleaning. Her beauty was simple, untouched by luxury, yet radiant in a way that struck Michael instantly. She slipped into the back seat, clutching her small purse, and sighed deeply as if the world had weighed her down. Michael glanced at her in the mirror, and for the first time in years, he felt curiosity, not about money, but about a soul. "Long day?" he asked, his voice steady but softer than she expected from a stranger. Emily gave a tired smile, her eyes meeting his in the reflection. "You have no idea. Sometimes it feels like I work to make everyone else's life shine, while mine just fades in the background." Michael's heart clenched at her honesty. For the first time, someone was speaking to him without knowing who he really was. And in that cab, on that rainy night, a story began that would change both of their lives forever. The cab rolled slowly through the rain-soaked streets of Manhattan, neon lights shimmering across the wet pavement. Inside, silence filled the air, broken only by the sound of raindrops hitting the roof. Michael stole another glance at Emily through the mirror. There was something in her expression, an unspoken pain, a quiet strength that drew him in. He had seen models, actresses, and women of high society, but none of them had eyes that told a story like hers. As the ride went on, Emily began to open up, almost forgetting she was speaking to a stranger. She told him about her mother, who was sick back in Queens, and how she worked endless hours cleaning hotel rooms just to keep the bills paid. Michael listened carefully, his chest tightening with every word. It was rare for him to hear such raw honesty. No pretense, no masks, just truth. And truth was something his life had been missing for far too long. When the taxi finally pulled up outside her small apartment building, Emily hesitated before getting out. The rain poured harder, drenching the street. Michael saw her shiver as she stepped onto the sidewalk, her thin uniform sticking to her skin. Something inside him refused to let her just walk away. Without thinking, he opened the passenger door and offered her his jacket. "You'll catch a cold," he said, his voice more caring than casual. Emily looked at him, surprised, but she took it with a small nod. That simple gesture ignited something between them. Days later, fate pushed their paths together again. Emily had left something in his taxi, a small notebook filled with sketches and personal thoughts. When Michael found it, he felt as though he had discovered a piece of her soul. Determined to return it, he went back to her neighborhood. She was shocked to see him waiting in the rain outside her building, notebook in hand, his eyes full of sincerity. Their connection grew quickly after that. One evening, after she had finished a brutal 12-hour shift, Michael offered her a ride home, but instead of dropping her off, their conversation flowed so deeply, so naturally, that neither of them wanted the night to end. They stopped at a small diner in Brooklyn, talking until dawn about dreams, disappointments, and everything in between. And that night, when the rain returned, Michael pulled her close in the back seat of his cab. What happened next was a moment of vulnerability for both, a night that would bind them together forever. Though neither realized how complicated things would soon become, the morning sun broke through the blinds of the small room, casting golden light across Emily's tired face. She woke up, wrapped in Michael's arms, the sound of the city buzzing faintly outside. For a moment, she allowed herself to believe in something she hadn't felt in years: peace. But Michael's chest was heavy with a secret. He wasn't just a taxi driver who had fallen for a maid. He was a man living a lie, hiding a world of wealth and expectations that Emily could never imagine. When Emily stepped out of the shower, she saw him buttoning his shirt with a precision that didn't match the life of a humble driver. His watch, a luxury brand, glimmered briefly under the light. She narrowed her eyes, but quickly brushed it off. "Nice watch," she said lightly, half smiling. Michael froze for a second before forcing a laugh. A gift? From a friend? His words felt flat, but Emily didn't push. Still, the seed of doubt was planted. Days turned into weeks, and their connection grew deeper. Michael was drawn to her resilience, her ability to smile despite hardship. He took her to small diners in Queens, to quiet walks in Central Park, always keeping the illusion of being just a driver. Yet every now and then something slipped, a refined word, a gesture, a glance that didn't belong to a simple working man. Emily began to notice, and with every little detail, her curiosity burned stronger. One evening, as they walked down Fifth Avenue, Emily caught Michael staring into the window of an upscale hotel. She laughed softly. "You look like you belong in there." He turned quickly, his jaw tight, his heart racing. She didn't know how right she was. "Maybe in another life," he replied. But his eyes betrayed him, and she saw something more, something he wasn't telling her. And then came the night everything changed. Emily was cleaning rooms at the very same hotel empire Michael secretly owned. As she turned the corner, her eyes fell on a large portrait in the lobby. Her heart stopped. It was him. Michael Anderson, heir to Anderson Hotels, standing proudly with his late father. Her hands trembled, and the room spun. The man she trusted, the man she gave her heart to, was living a lie, but what Emily did next would change both of their lives forever. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she stared at the grand portrait. It wasn't just similar, it was him, the same face she had kissed under the rain, the same eyes that had looked at her with tenderness in the back of a taxi. Only here, in gold-framed luxury, he wasn't Michael the driver. He was Michael Anderson, heir to an empire she could never belong to. Her chest tightened, and anger boiled inside her. She stormed out of the hotel lobby, her footsteps echoing across the marble floor. When Michael found her that night, her eyes were filled with fire. "You lied to me, Michael," she shouted, tears streaming down her face. "You made me believe you were one of us, a man who understood struggle, sacrifice, pain. But you're a millionaire who played with me like some cheap story." Michael reached for her hand, his own voice shaking. "Emily, please. I never meant to hurt you. I wanted someone to see me for who I am, not what I own. With you, I felt human again." But Emily pulled away, her heart shattered. She could feel the weight of every sacrifice she had ever made. And now she was standing before a man who had everything but chose to deceive her. Around them, people whispered, recognizing Michael Anderson's face. Some laughed, mocking the maid who thought she belonged at the side of a millionaire. The humiliation burned through Emily's skin, and she turned her back to him, her pride stronger than her pain. Michael stood frozen, watching her disappear into the rainy night, his soul aching. For the first time in his life, money couldn't fix what was broken. He realized that all the wealth in the world couldn't buy trust, and without trust, love was impossible. He wanted to chase her, to shout to the world that she was the woman he loved, but fear chained him down. Fear of losing his image, fear of disappointing his family, fear of being truly vulnerable. Before we reveal what Michael does next, don't forget to subscribe and share this story with someone who believes love is stronger than lies. Your support means the world and helps us keep bringing you these emotional journeys. What Emily did after walking away, nobody could have imagined. The days that followed were heavy with silence. Emily returned to her small apartment in Queens, her heart torn between love and betrayal. She buried herself in work, scrubbing floors and changing linens, determined not to shed another tear for a man who had deceived her. Yet every night, when the city lights flickered through her window, she thought of him, the man who had once looked at her not as a maid, but as if she were the only person in the world. Meanwhile, Michael was drowning in regret. He sat alone in the penthouse of his family's hotel, staring out at the skyline of New York City, but all he could see was Emily's face. His grandmother, Eleanor Anderson, a strong and wise woman who had built the family's foundation long before the wealth, noticed his pain. "Michael," she said firmly, "you may be rich in money, but you are poor in courage. If you truly love her, you must fight for her, not with gifts, not with your fortune, but with your heart." Her words struck him deeper than anything else ever had. For once, Michael saw clearly. Wealth had always been his prison, keeping him locked behind appearances and expectations. But Emily had given him a glimpse of freedom. He realized that if he didn't act now, he would lose the only real thing that had ever happened to him. With newfound resolve, he left the luxury behind and drove that same old taxi through the rain, searching for her. Emily, on the other hand, refused to crumble. She held her head high, even when co-workers whispered about the maid who dared to fall for a millionaire. Their gossip was cruel, but she reminded herself of her worth. She wasn't defined by his money or their judgment. She had dreams of her own, dreams she had kept locked away in that little notebook Michael once held. And now, more than ever, she was determined to chase them, with or without him. And then one evening, as Emily was leaving work, she found Michael waiting outside in the rain. But this time, he wasn't dressed in tailored suits or polished shoes. He was in his plain taxi driver clothes, holding nothing but a bouquet of wildflowers. His eyes were raw, vulnerable, pleading. "Emily," he whispered, his voice trembling, "I don't want to be Michael Anderson, the millionaire. I just want to be the man who loves you. Please, let me prove it." But Emily's answer would shock him in ways he never expected. Emily stared at him, her hair dripping from the rain, her maid's uniform clinging to her skin. The wildflowers trembled in his hands, fragile against the storm. Her heart ached at the sight of him, broken, vulnerable, stripped of all the arrogance wealth had once given him. But the wound of betrayal was still raw. She crossed her arms and said firmly, "You don't get to lie to me and then just show up with flowers. Love is not a disguise, Michael. Love is truth." Her words cut deep, but Michael nodded, accepting every bit of pain. "I know," he admitted, his voice low. "I failed you. I failed myself. But I swear to you, Emily, I will prove I can be the man you deserve. Not Anderson Hotels, not the fortune, just me." For the first time, he wasn't trying to charm her with wealth or promises. He was begging with honesty, and that honesty made her hesitate. Emily took a deep breath, her eyes searching his. "If you mean what you say, then prove it. Use your power, your name, not to protect yourself, but to protect the people who work for you. The maids, the cleaners, the ones no one sees. If you can fight for them the way you say you love me, then maybe, just maybe, I'll believe you again." Her voice cracked slightly, but her resolve stood firm. Michael felt his chest tighten. This was not just about winning her back. It was about redefining himself. His grandmother's words echoed in his mind. Courage, not wealth. He took her hand gently, rain pouring over both of them. "Then I'll do it. I'll use everything I have to honor the people who make this city shine, the people like you. Because without you, Emily, my life is meaningless." For the first time, she didn't pull away. But what Michael did next would not only change Emily's life, it would change the future of his entire empire. The following week, the Anderson family hosted a grand charity gala at their flagship hotel in Manhattan. The chandeliers sparkled, the tables glittered with gold, and the room overflowed with wealthy elites in designer gowns and tuxedos. Michael stood among them, but for the first time he felt nothing but emptiness. He scanned the crowd until his eyes found Emily, standing at the edge of the room in her maid's uniform, serving drinks. She didn't look at him. Her chin held high, her dignity shining brighter than the diamonds in the room. Suddenly, whispers spread through the guests. "Isn't that the maid Michael has been seen with? What a disgrace to the Anderson name." Laughter followed, cruel and sharp. Emily's face burned, but she refused to lower her gaze. Michael's chest tightened, anger rising inside him. He could no longer stand by while the woman he loved was humiliated. He stepped onto the stage, grabbing the microphone, his voice echoing across the hall. "Enough." Michael's words silenced the crowd. His eyes blazed as he looked at the sea of judgment before him. "Yes, this is Emily Johnson. She is a maid. She is strong, honest, and worth more than every fortune in this room combined. You mock her because of her uniform, but she has more dignity in her hands than any of us have in our pockets. And I will not hide it anymore. I love her. She is my future." The room gasped, a wave of shock sweeping across the elite faces. Emily froze, her heart pounding. She had dreamed of him choosing truth, but never imagined he would stand against his own world for her. Tears welled in her eyes as Michael turned to her, holding out his hand. "Emily," he said, his voice trembling but strong, "I don't care about their wealth, their opinions, or even my family's empire. Without you, I am nothing. But with you, I'm alive. If you believe love can break every barrier, hit that subscribe button right now and share this story with someone who needs hope. Together, let's prove love always wins." The ballroom fell into complete silence. All eyes turned to Emily, the maid who had just been lifted into the center of a world that was never meant for her. Her hands trembled as the tray slipped slightly from her grasp. Tears glistened on her cheeks, but her back remained straight, her pride unshaken. She looked at Michael, standing vulnerable before everyone, and for the first time she saw not the millionaire, but the man. She stepped forward, her shoes clicking softly against the marble floor. Whispers followed her every step, judgment still heavy in the air. When she reached him, her voice cracked but carried strength. "You broke my trust, Michael. You made me feel small, like I didn't matter. But tonight you stood here and faced them all. Not with your wealth, not with your power, but with your truth. And that's the man I fell for." Her words echoed, and the crowd shifted uneasily. Emily turned to the audience, her voice growing stronger. "You laugh at me because of my uniform. But this uniform has fed my family, paid my mother's medicine, and kept me standing when the world wanted me on my knees. I may be a maid, but I am not less than any of you. I'm proud of who I am." Gasps rippled through the room, and some even lowered their heads in shame. Michael's grandmother smiled softly, her eyes filled with tears. Michael took her hand in his, gripping it firmly. "Then stand with me, Emily. Not as the maid, not as the millionaire, but as two people who found each other against every odd." Emily hesitated, her heart pounding. And then, with a single nod, she whispered, "Yes, I will." The room erupted, not in laughter, but in stunned silence, broken only by the sound of applause starting in the back. Slowly it spread until even those who mocked her moments before were clapping. For Michael and Emily, the world blurred. The lights, the stares, the whispers all disappeared. There was only them, holding each other under the weight of truth and the promise of a future rebuilt from honesty, not lies. But what happened after that night proved their story was only just beginning. In the weeks that followed, the Anderson name was no longer just tied to luxury hotels and wealth. It became a symbol of change. Michael, true to his word, began transforming the way his empire treated its workers. Maids and cleaners received better wages, health benefits, and respect long overdue. For the first time, employees felt seen. And every step he took toward justice reminded Emily that this man was serious about his promise. Emily, too, began to flourish. No longer just a shadow in expensive hallways, she stepped into the light of her own dreams. She started a small foundation in Queens, helping women from working-class families gain access to education and opportunities she never had. Michael stood by her side, not as her savior, but as her partner. Together, they built something stronger than fortune, purpose. One quiet evening, the two sat in the back of that same yellow taxi where it had all begun. Rain tapped gently against the windows, but this time there was no fear, no lies, only love. Michael held Emily's hand and smiled. "You once told me you felt invisible," he whispered. "But to me, you are the only person I see." Her eyes filled with tears as she rested her head on his shoulder. "And you, Michael, you're no longer a man in disguise. You're just mine." Their story was no fairy tale. It was raw, messy, and born from pain. But that's what made it real. And in a world where appearances often outweigh truth, Michael and Emily proved that love rooted in honesty could conquer even the highest walls of wealth and pride. Their journey had been one of betrayal, humiliation, and broken trust, but it ended with courage, redemption, and a love that refused to surrender. If this story touched your heart, don't leave without subscribing. Share it with someone who needs hope, and let us know in the comments. Do you believe love can truly overcome lies and social barriers? Your voice matters, and together we'll keep these powerful stories alive.